I think if you genuinely care for people, I think if you're seeking the Lord and the sense of God's presence is there, you can do the kinds of things to be relevant. You can address the kind of topics. But I think at the heart of it, people are seeking an experience with God, seeking to know God, seeking to know the truth, and they're seeking authenticity. I think two things make relevant churches today. One is relationships, and the other is authenticity.
Hey, it's time for Pastor's Forum. I'm Byron Tyler. Glad you could stop by. On this week's program, my privilege to invite a pastor to come in and share his heart for ministry, a little bit about his family, and just where he's at in his journey of ministry toward our community and toward the people of his congregation. And this week, we want to welcome from the Orchard, Pastor Sam Shaw. Sam, good to see you. How you doing?
Good to see you, Byron. Thank you.
We're wearing vests today.
Good fashion is always in style, I guess.
I love wearing a vest. But the last time we sat down, you had just come to town and were pastoring Germantown Baptist Church.
Right.
And since then, God has led you on a journey.
He has. We were at Germantown for about 8 years. Resigned and actually went to Mississippi, went to Tupelo, to a wonderful church, wonderful people, wonderful little town. Met some of the finest people I've ever met, but had just kind of a sense of restlessness. And I would come back to Memphis or go to Austin or to Tulsa, and my wife would say, "You just come alive. What's going on?" And I couldn't figure it out. This was some of the best people I've ever met. A wonderful place. I'm a missionary, having served overseas, and I kept asking, the byline of the newspaper in Tupelo says, "Dedicated to the glory of God and the good of mankind." And I kept thinking, why am I here? What's going on? I'm so restless. So we decided to fast and pray to see if we could get direction from the Lord. What was going on? We determined we'd go on a 40-day fast. 3 days into the fast, my wife heard from God, but she wouldn't tell me. 7 more days into the fast, and I'm reading from Haggai, of all places, and every fear that I had, every concern about returning to Memphis and starting a church was answered. It was uncanny. In fact, I was journaling, and I wrote in my journal, "Are you speaking to me?" So we made that decision. The elders of our church there said, "We don't like this at all, but we believe you've heard from God," and godly men, they affirmed that. And so we moved back April the 15th of 2010, and then officially launched the church September the 12th of 2010.
I want you to tell me about the name Orchard, because when I think of Orchard, I remember back when I was in high school, we took a trip to Central Florida, and I remember all those orange groves. Everywhere you looked, there was oranges.
If you think about an orchard, you think of a place that's refreshing, cool in the summertime. The roots go down deep, and actually they get interconnected with one another, so it strengthens those trees. The trees are reaching up. They're producing fruit. They're providing shade. All of that was a part of the vision that we feel like the Lord gave us in launching the church, that it be a place of refreshment, a place that actually helps people to produce fruit in their own life, a place where people's lives are connected with one another in such a way that if I'm weak, you're strong, you stand with me, we stand together, we reach up to God in praise and in worship, and we reach out to one another. So all those pictures. But full disclosure, there was an Orchard church in Tupelo, and I was so struck with that name that I called the pastor there and said, "What do you think we borrow your name?" He said, "As long as you don't produce a dead church." Well, okay, we don't want to do that.
Talk about being relevant to today's generation.
You know, I'm 63 years old. And we have so many young adults in our church, and it's kind of unusual. Our worship pastor and his wife actually moved with us. We looked at each other and said, "Can a 29 and a 59-year-old plant a church together?" So we said, well, let's give it a shot. And we did. I think if you genuinely care for people, I think if you're seeking the Lord and the sense of God's presence is there, you can do the kinds of things to be relevant. You can address the kind of topics. But I think at the heart of it, people are seeking an experience with God, seeking to know God, seeking to know the truth, and they're seeking authenticity. I think two things make relevant churches today. One is relationships, and the other is authenticity. Is this a place where it's okay not to be perfect? Is this a place where it's recognized, even the leaders admit, we're all in this together, we're wrestling together? And is this a place where I can connect with other people around the common purpose of experiencing God?
There can be a danger if you get too traditional to the point where you're traditional for tradition's sake.
Yeah, traditionalism. I don't think tradition's a problem. Our second service, we had traditions in place. So if you do something, the same thing over and over, you have a tradition. And tradition's not bad, but holding on a tradition for tradition's sake can put you out of...
At the expense of being able to reach somebody for Christ, because sometimes that happens.
Absolutely. And you have to ask the question, what's most important here? What is it we're really trying to do? Who are we trying to impress? I'm not trying to impress other Christians. I'm not trying to impress the Lord. He's neither impressed nor unimpressed. He loves me regardless. Whose attention are we trying to capture here? And so that's one of the questions that we had coming to the church. What kind of church will we be? What kind of core values will guide us and direct us where we want to go?
Now, you already kind of alluded to the fact that your wife was one who obviously seeks God with you when you make these decisions. She already had it clear that this is what God wanted you guys to do.
She had so much encouragement for me regardless, always has been that way. But we launched this together. When we were married 40 years ago, we agreed that we were partners. And I told the Lord, if you want me to do something, you're going to have to tell her as well. And that's the way that I'll know you're in this, because she has a strong gift of discernment. So if she says, yeah, I believe that's what the Lord wants as well, it's a real confidence builder for me.
Do you remember the very first time you stood behind a pulpit and preached your first sermon?
I do. It was awful. In fact, when my wife was dating me, her roommate said, you're going to hear this guy preach? Oh, take a book. It's horrible. Probably not much better today, but...
Those first initiations, if you base...
Oh, the poor people sitting out and listening.
You know, I had a pastor friend of mine when I was in Bible college, and he invited me. He said, why don't you preach a sermon for me? You know, I never really felt called to be a preacher, but I'll do this. I'm a Bible college student, and I remember looking out across the congregation. There was girls out there putting their makeup on and all kinds of stuff. Am I that boring?
Oh, boy. All of that took place. My wife brought a book along, so...
Sam, what about your journey with Jesus? When and how did that begin?
I began to understand the gospel and came under conviction for my sin when I was about 9, but I didn't know what was going on. It scared me. In fact, from about age 9 to age 12, I didn't want to go to church with my parents. I made up excuses. I said I was sick or whatever. I would go and feel bad, and I didn't understand why. And I didn't understand the gospel and what Jesus had done and what he could do in my life. But when I was about 12, it came to the point I felt I can't go this anymore like this. So I actually, in a Sunday night service, after the service, I walked down toward the front of the room and got on my knees and said, God, if you don't take away this horrible sense of guilt that I feel, and I was just 12 years old, but if you don't take it away, I'm going to die. And please come and save me from that. I trust in you and I want to follow you. It lifted. I was so excited after that. My neighbor next door was out one day, and I went, his name was Bobby Click. I said, Bobby, I was saved last night. He said, what? I invited him to come to church. I couldn't get enough of reading the Bible. It was like thirst finding water for me. I would, nighttime, my parents would say, go on to bed, and I would go to bed, and I'd take a flashlight, get under the covers, and I would read the Bible with my flashlight. Just all those signs of new life were there.
That turning point for you is when you came to understand the gospel, really how it was going to impact your life or how it could impact your life. Where are we as the church failing to communicate that in a way where people can really understand the gospel and how it relates to them?
I think we get involved in all kinds of other things except the gospel. We don't remain centered in the gospel. God's great love given to us, purchased at the price of the death of the Son of God, and the fact that the Lord literally adores us, that in Christ wants to be with us. Why would the sovereign God of the universe want to be with me? I don't understand. That's a mystery. Adopts us into his family when we place our faith in him. He actually engenders faith, creates life in us that was not there before. And it's like he breathes on us and we come to life. It's fresh and it's new. So it's like the sky's different. At least that was the case with me when I became a follower of Christ.
Do you typically do series in your preaching?
I do.
How do you determine what's the barometer for the series?
A couple of things. I'll ask myself, what am I interested in right now? If I'm going to stand up and go through a long series, I want to do something that's interesting to me. And sometimes it will be a Bible book through Philippians or Judges or James or whatever. Sometimes it's dealing with an issue that people are dealing with now. We did a series called Toxic. everywhere around us. Toxic feelings, toxic people, toxic thinking. I'm doing a series right now called Margin. And it really came about because I kept hearing people say, I'm just overwhelmed. I couldn't find anyone who didn't say, when I said, how are you doing? I'm busy. I'm slammed right now. Why is that? People underwater, worried about finances, and begin to put all of that together. So we're in a series looking at how does God want us to live wisely so that our lives really do have some breathing room, some margin there.
Yeah.
So actually it comes either from the Scriptures or from what I see around me, a sense of God's leadership.
Do you get to a dry place in your life sometimes?
Oh, sure. Yeah. In fact, I have an accountability partner. I came here for a meeting with him, and he said, okay, how are you doing with your time with the Lord? I said, the last couple of days, it's like eating cereal without milk and sugar. It's just kind of, he said, that's when you need to keep at it. So it was a good word. It was a really good word. So I think everybody goes through ups and downs like that.
And oftentimes that's when we give up.
Oh, it is. Yeah, we just kind of walk away, or we say, well, this doesn't work. And my accountability partner, the guy that I meet with, said, at the end of the year, I was reading the Minor Prophets. He said, it was tough sledding. I was doing it just because that's what you're supposed to do. But he said, now I'm reading the Psalms. It's like breathing. Oxygen has come into the room. We go through ups and downs. That's just life.
Where's home for the Orchard?
We meet at Briarcrest on Houston Levee, and we also meet at St. George's out on Houston Levee. So we're out in the eastern suburbs.
Are you at both locations?
We are. We use all the space that's available to us there at Briarcrest. A couple of services on Sunday morning.
You teach in both locations?
No, I actually teach in one. Our student ministry goes to St. George's, meets there. Our student pastor leads that, his staff. And then we have what we call equipping classes, part of what we call Move You. That's the idea of how do you grow in your faith. So those classes all take place at St. George's.
Okay. And when do those service times meet?
9 and 10:45. So we have classes that meet at 9, 10:45. Student ministry that takes place at 10:45. But then all the kinds of things that usually take place during the worship service.
What about a website?
orchardfellowship.org.
Sam, I want to continue the conversation. Our time on this week is slipping away, but I want to pick it back up next week and continue about the life and times of Sam Shaw.
Surely there are more interesting topics.
I can't think of any right now. We're gonna pick it up next time if that's okay.
You bet.
Friends, that's all the time we have on this week's Pastors Forum. Thanks for stopping by. Our guest is Sam Shaw, pastor of the Orchard, and we're going to be here next time to continue with Sam. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler. Hey, we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.